They called me a leech at the dinner table I set, with the food I cooked, paid for with money I earned while they secretly plotted my destruction. My name is Sarah Chun, I'm 26 years old, and the betrayal that shattered my world happened on a day meant for gratitude. Golden turkey glistening on the table, sweet potato casserole still steaming, 3 homemade pies cooling on the counter. I spent the entire morning cooking while my family watched football, celebrating my recent promotion just 20 minutes before everything collapsed. Then my stepfather Marcus looked me dead in the eye and said the words that changed everything. "You're nothing but a leech. Time for you to leave this house." The silence that followed was deafening. My mother Rita stared at her untouched plate. My 17-year-old sister Amy's eyes went wide with shock. But what made this betrayal truly devastating wasn't just the timing, it was the irony. My name was on every bill that kept that house running. The electricity illuminating our Thanksgiving dinner. The water that filled their glasses. The insurance that covered my mother's recent doctor visits. Yet somehow I was the burden. 3 months earlier, when Mom lost her accounting job, I stepped up without question. The bills piled higher than their excuses, and Marcus's part-time hardware store wages barely touched the mortgage. I started covering everything else: utilities, groceries, car insurance, medical expenses. Each month, as more accounts transferred to my name, Marcus grew more distant, more resentful. His authority was slipping away with every signature I provided. 2 weeks before that Thanksgiving nightmare, I overheard him complaining to the neighbor through an open kitchen window. "It's not right," he grumbled. "A man losing control of his own household. She acts like she owns the place now." When I heard him say my name, the puzzle pieces started forming a picture I wasn't ready to see. As Marcus waited for tears or protests at that dinner table, I simply continued eating. The sweet potato tasted like nothing, but I chewed methodically, swallowed, and took another bite. When he demanded acknowledgement of his ultimatum, I met his gaze with 3 words that hung in the air like a death sentence. "I understand perfectly." My composure clearly unnerved him. Then came the moment that revealed everything. My mother's voice, hushed and hurried. "Sarah, you'll still pay the medical insurance this month, right? I have that appointment on Tuesday. Not daughter, just a signature on the bottom of checks. Not family, just a financial resource." But that was only the beginning of what I'd discover. That night, packing at 1:18 a.m. with Marcus's words echoing in my mind, I found something that changed everything. Hidden beneath my financial documents were bank statements I'd never seen before, statements with Marcus's name spanning the last 3 months. An account with a balance that grew each month while I drained my savings to keep their lights on. $4,000 in July, $5,000 in August, nearly $7,000 by November. Beneath those statements, a boat dealer's brochure with Marcus's handwritten notes. Down payment $5,500, circled in blue ink. Scheduled delivery after Thanksgiving, underlined twice. A fishing boat. While I was eating ramen 3 times a week to afford my mother's cosmetic procedures, they were planning their leisure purchase. There was more. A notepad with November utility due dates, my name with question marks, and the phrase "after bills paid" written and underlined. They'd been planning this for weeks, waiting until I covered November's expenses before kicking me out. Amy slipped into my room as I processed this betrayal, confirming my worst fears. "Dad's buying that boat. I heard them planning this weeks ago, how they'd wait until after you paid the bills." The casual confirmation hit like a physical blow. My own sister knew, but fear of becoming their next target kept her silent. Then came the revelation that shattered any remaining illusions. Those medical appointments I'd been paying for with my insurance? Amy's voice dropped to a whisper. Last week Mom came home with her lips all puffy. She told Dad the doctor said she couldn't drink through a straw for 2 days. It wasn't a checkup, Sarah. It was fillers. I pulled out my banking app, showing Amy the brutal reality. $763.42. 3 months ago, I had over $9,000 saved. This was what remained after funding their secret schemes while I survived on scraps. As I methodically documented every receipt, every proof of purchase, every utility bill with my name clearly listed, I faced a choice that would define everything that followed. Confront them with evidence of their manipulation, or disappear quietly and let them discover the consequences on their own. I chose a third option that they never saw coming. 3 days later, Aunt Patricia's voice crackled through my phone like breaking glass. Honestly, Sarah, I never thought you'd abandon your parents when they needed you most. Marcus had already spun his version for family consumption, painting me as the ungrateful daughter who abandoned them after a little disagreement. But while they organized family meetings to discuss my behavior, I was organizing something far more strategic. Operation Financial Freedom had begun. I canceled automatic payments for their utilities, removed myself from their cell phone plan, and called to take my name off their internet service. The customer service representative actually laughed when I explained I was voluntarily removing myself from financial responsibility for my parents' bills. That's a first, she said. When my mother called 5 days later, panic sharp in her voice, reality was setting in. What have you done? The power's out, the internet's down, and my insurance was declined at my appointment. I stopped paying for things that weren't my responsibility, I replied, my voice steady as stone. But you can't just leave us like this, we're your family. Family doesn't call family a leech at Thanksgiving dinner. But they weren't finished trying to control me. The next morning brought fraud alerts to my phone. 3 password reset attempts on my banking accounts from my parents' home address. They weren't just trying to guilt me back, they were trying to steal what little I had left. I immediately secured everything: new accounts, enhanced security measures, fraud protection. Each confirmation felt like a brick in the wall I was building between my old life and whatever came next. That's when Marcus made his biggest mistake. 3 days later, thunderous pounding rattled my friend's apartment door. Marcus's voice boomed through the wood. "Blair, open this door right now." When I refused, he escalated to threats, then kicked the door hard enough to splinter the wood around the lock. My elderly neighbor, Mrs. Patterson, had already called building security and police. As officers escorted my stepfather down the hallway in handcuffs, still shouting that I was destroying our family, I made a decision that would change everything. "Would you like to press charges for the attempted break-in?" Officer Rodriguez asked. "Yes," I said, my voice small but firm, "and I'd like to file for a restraining order." The system that had felt stacked against me was now working in my favor. While Marcus sat in a holding cell, my mother made her next move, stealing my laptop and camera from my old bedroom. She pawned them for $300, then had the audacity to text me that I owed her the money plus interest for collateral against what I owed them. I had purchase receipts, serial numbers, and documentation for everything. Officer Williams took my theft report seriously, and within days my property was recovered from the pawn shop. Criminal charges followed. But here's where their plan truly unraveled in the most beautiful way possible. 3 days after filing the theft report, my mother called with a proposition that revealed their desperation. "If you drop that ridiculous theft report, you can come back home. We'll let you continue living here, of course." When I didn't immediately agree, she played her final card. "Frank and I are concerned that you might be having some kind of breakdown. That's something our friends and family would understand better than what you're claiming happened. Drop the charges, or be labeled unstable. The threat was crystal clear. But I was ready for this too. I have copies of every bill I've paid for the last 6 months, I replied calmly. I have bank statements showing transfers to your account. I have text messages asking me to pay for your cosmetic procedures that you claimed were medical necessities. Would you like me to present all of that as evidence? The silence told me everything I needed to know. The next morning, Officer Williams accompanied me to retrieve my remaining belongings. As we walked through the house with neighbors watching from their windows, I presented her with folders documenting every financial contribution. Her eyebrows rose as she flipped through pages of receipts, utility bills, and bank transfers. "You paid for all of this while living here?" she asked. "Yes, for the past 6 months, since my mother lost her job. When my mother tried to claim the furniture belonged to the family, I produced receipts for everything I was taking." Officer Williams studied the financial records, then looked at my mother with barely concealed amazement. "Mrs. Chun, these documents show your daughter has been supporting this household almost entirely on her own." My mother retreated without another word. But Marcus had one final card to play, and it backfired spectacularly. As I loaded the last box into my car, he pulled into the driveway driving my other vehicle, the one I'd left at my friend's apartment. He'd used the spare emergency key to steal it. "We need to discuss what you owe us before you take this too," he announced, jingling my keys triumphantly. I reached into my purse and pulled out the vehicle title and registration, both clearly showing my name. Officer Williams stepped forward immediately. "Sir, that vehicle is registered to Sarah. You need to hand over the keys immediately." The color drained from Marcus's face as reality hit. His hand tightened around the keys as he desperately tried to justify 18 years of expenses he'd invested in raising me. "The keys, Mr. Mitchell," Officer Williams repeated, extending her hand. Slowly, his fingers uncurled. The keys dropped into her palm with a soft jingle that sounded like victory. As I drove away from that house for the final time, I saw neighbors standing on their lawns, phones in hand, witnessing the complete collapse of the narrative my parents had tried to control. In my rearview mirror, Amy appeared in the doorway, caught between worlds, one foot in the house where our parents remained, one hand raised in a tentative wave goodbye. But the most devastating revenge was still coming, and I didn't even have to orchestrate it. You see, Marcus and my mother had built their entire scheme around one fatal assumption that I would always be there to bail them out. They'd grown so dependent on my financial support that they'd forgotten how to survive without it. Within 3 months of my departure, the carefully constructed house of cards came tumbling down. First, the utilities were shut off when they couldn't cover the bills they'd grown accustomed to me paying. Then the internet service was discontinued. My mother's insurance lapsed, meaning no more cosmetic procedures disguised as medical necessities. The car insurance I'd been covering was canceled, leaving them unable to drive legally. But the beautiful irony was yet to come. Remember that boat Marcus was so excited about? The one he'd been secretly saving for while I paid their bills? The dealer required full payment on delivery, but without my monthly contributions, their savings account couldn't stretch to cover both the boat and their basic living expenses. They had to choose between their dream purchase and keeping the lights on. They chose the boat. For exactly 6 weeks, Marcus enjoyed his fishing trips while their unpaid bills piled higher. When the foreclosure notice arrived, they tried desperately to return the boat, but the dealer's no-return policy was ironclad. They'd sacrificed their home for a luxury they couldn't afford to maintain. The house I'd financially supported for months, the one they'd kicked me out of, was sold at auction. The proceeds barely covered their debts. The neighbors who'd witnessed Marcus's arrest, my parents' financial manipulation, and the spectacular public breakdown of their lies watched them pack their belongings into a U-Haul trailer. The same neighbors who'd once listened to Marcus complain about losing control of his household now watched him lose the household entirely. They were forced to move in with Uncle Rick, sleeping on air mattresses in his garage, dependent on the charity of relatives who quickly grew tired of supporting two adults who refused to take responsibility for their choices. Amy texted me updates that felt like chapters in a cautionary tale. They lost the house last month. Dad's still blaming the bank, the economy, everyone but himself. Uncle Rick's already dropping hints about them finding their own place. A year later, as I hosted Thanksgiving in my own apartment, the contrast wasn't lost on me. My table was smaller, my turkey more modest, but everything was genuinely mine, earned through my own efforts, chosen with care rather than acquired through obligation. Amy had flourished since moving into her college dorm, escaping the same toxic environment I'd fled. I helped her navigate financial aid forms and housing applications, knowledge from my own journey becoming stepping stones for hers. "They still blame you for everything," she told me as we worked on scholarship applications at my kitchen counter. "But honestly, they're just facing what would have happened anyway. Your money was just postponing the inevitable." As I helped Amy build her independent life, I sometimes found myself staring at the stack of unopened letters on my bookshelf. 5 envelopes from my parents, all unread. Setting boundaries didn't mean I didn't sometimes wonder what they contained. But then I'd look around my peaceful apartment, at the bills organized neatly on my desk, all in my name and comfortably within my budget. I'd check my bank statement and see numbers growing steadily each month, building the emergency fund they'd once depleted. The revenge I'd orchestrated wasn't dramatic or explosive. It was quiet, methodical, and absolutely devastating. I'd simply stopped enabling their dysfunction and let natural consequences take their course. They'd called me a leech, but the truth was exactly the opposite. They were the parasites, feeding off my success while secretly planning to discard me once I'd served their purpose. By removing myself from their equation, I'd revealed what they really were without my support. Adults who couldn't manage their own lives, who'd lost everything because they'd never learned to survive without someone else's sacrifice. The most beautiful part? I didn't have to destroy them. I just had to stop saving them from themselves. Marcus had wanted control of his household back. He got it, right up until the moment he lost the household entirely. My mother had wanted to keep using my insurance for her cosmetic procedures. Now she couldn't afford basic medical care. They'd wanted me gone so they could enjoy their boat in peace. They got their wish, along with homelessness, financial ruin, and the complete destruction of their reputation among family and neighbors. Sometimes the most perfect revenge is simply walking away and letting people face the consequences of their own choices. They'd taught me that family was about what you could provide, not who you were. So I'd provided them with exactly what they'd asked for: my absence. And in that absence, they'd discovered that I wasn't the leech after all. I was the lifeline they'd thrown away. The turkey I carved that Thanksgiving was golden and perfect, seasoned with gratitude instead of resentment. Around my table sat people who valued my company over my contributions, who celebrated my successes instead of resenting them. My parents had wanted to teach me a lesson about family loyalty. Instead, they'd taught me something far more valuable: that the family you choose is often worth more than the family you're born into. And as Amy raised her glass in a toast to found family and boundaries worth keeping, I realized that their betrayal had been the greatest gift they'd ever given me. It had set me free,